Oh, thank you. I literally told them to do that. Welcome to Build Weekend Watch, where we talk about the latest releases from everything new on Netflix to everything new in the theaters, just in case you have no friends, hate socializing, and want to passively watch stuff alone all weekend. I'm Ricky Camilleri, and I'm here with some folks from the HuffPost entertainment team. We have reporter Matthew Jacobs and senior editor Lauren Moraski. They're going to talk all this stuff with me. Thanks for being here, you guys. Now, there is so much opening in the theaters, premiering on Netflix and on TV this weekend. We've got a lot of ground to cover if we're going to keep you screen junkies occupied. Let's start with Pose, the new FX show from TV powerhouse Ryan, I hate the word camp, Murphy. Pose is a daring, beautiful show that dramatizes the LGBTQ ball scene of the 1980s in New York City. Let's take a look at a clip.
The ballroom is about us. We took dance from mainstream and posing in magazines and created Vogue.
It's a place you can live out a fantasy that you never lived before.
At the core of it, it's community.
It's about being alone and then finding people that are just like you.
I'm able to be true to myself in a space where that's celebrated. That makes me feel beautiful.
Give him some music and pose!
Now, I've seen the first few episodes of the show. Lauren, I think you've seen some of it as well. Matt, you're in the dark here.
No, you're so behind.
So behind. I love it. I absolutely love the show. I love the pilot. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was funny. I thought it was incredibly stylish. And one thing that I was happy with was that they didn't do the show in the style of the Paris is Burning documentary as that ad was done. I was very worried that the series was actually going to be that. And I was going to be like, do not do that to Paris is Burning. Lauren, what did you think of the show?
I agree with you 100%. I loved the show. The pilot was awesome. Actually, as opposed to what you think, I actually liked the second episode. I know we differ on that, but the pilot was
totally okay.
Yeah. This is a show that takes place in the 80s, and they do such a great job recreating that era, from the music to the actual, they're listening to cassette tapes, which is cool. It really brings you back, and having it take place in New York, I think they do a really nice job. Did you like that?
Yeah, I loved it. There's also all of these moments where you know it's a green screen just because New York does not look like that anymore, so there's no way it can't be. But I don't think I've seen anything else on TV do that without it looking digital, and this show kind of finally does. Like, I think of The Deuce, which is a show I love and something that we should talk about in reference to Pose anyway for other reasons. And I think of how The Deuce at times still looks very digital when they're walking through Times Square, and this never has a moment of that. It's shocking how good the work is to make it look like 1980s New York City.
Do you guys feel like the Ryan Murphy paw prints or footprints are all over this show? My faith is sort of restored in him
100%.
after Assassination of Gianni Versace earlier this year, which I adored and ate up after having sort of been a little dismissive toward some of Ryan Murphy's more recent stuff. But I thought he sort of fine-tuned himself a little bit on that show, and I'm curious how it sort of translates to this kind of broader, more colorful and stylized world.
If you mean, is Ryan Murphy thereby, are there a ton of swooping crane shots and steady
following people
cams?
down hallways from the backside?
Yes.
Then yes, he is there. What did you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, this is a pet project for him too. I think this is something that he really, really enjoys, and it's really giving a close look at this ball culture of like the 80s, of these competitions amongst dancers and people dressing up, and it's just so beautiful that it's hard to keep your eyes off of it.
What did you think about it? Let's go back to The Deuce for a second, which is, HBO's show about the sort of pornographic underworld of late 70s New York City, starring a fairly straight white cast for the most part. What did you think about Pose as a kind of, not an answer to that, but as an almost like sort of sister show to that? Yes, it's 10 years later, but it is still very much about the dirty movie theaters and about underground culture in a grittier New York City, but an LGBTQ represented underground culture.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with all the LGBTQ characters in this. I mean, I think even the crew members and the people behind the scenes, it's like 75% representation, which I really, really enjoyed, which is a heads up to, Ryan Murphy, of course.
Yeah, when you get to those ball scenes, and you see all of those extras in those scenes, it's shocking. You're kind of like, oh, I've never seen extras like this in a show before.
And kudos to that. And I think even if you love it or hate the show, I think it's worth it just to watch it for that reason alone, because it's just really representing the diversity I think we need to see on screen these days. And as opposed to Deuce, this takes place in the 80s. Deuce was mostly like 70s,
Late
right?
70s,
Yeah, late 70s, right? So again, back to the time period, this is a time where AIDS is really big, and we're seeing that playing out on the screen there.
Deuce is pre-AIDS
Yep.
as well. Yeah.
Yep. And also Trump is very much a factor
that's
in
right.
And I would argue, unfortunately, so
Yes.
that's one of the few things of Pose that feels a little
Does he appear,
heavy-handed.
or does a version of him appear?
Some characters work for his organization.
James Van Der Beek plays one of his top guys.
James Van Der
believe it
Beek
or
is
not.
going full
Yes.
American Psycho
Yes.
in this as well.
That's amazing.
Yes.
What a great
Yes.
hook.
It is amazing. But I will say it's one of the few things of the show that feels like the kind of heavy-handed Ryan Murphy that can happen sometimes, that makes me groan a little bit, because there's so much talent and there's so much that he has to say that is really smart and beautiful and transcendent at times. And then there's always these moments where it's like, ah, come on.
Well, that's the
Didn't
one
have to do
thing that weighed down Feud, the Jessica Lange, Susan Sarandon show about Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, that I thought was overall quite good, except in its moments when Ryan Murphy feels like his writing has to be pedantic and so literal and preachy. And when you're embedding in the world of Hollywood sexism or queer dance ball culture, you don't need a lot of that.
There's a fair amount of didacticism in Pose, and at times you can sort of let it go, because you're kind of like, this is the first show of this kind. Like, yes, preach, teach the world. But then there are times when you're kind of like, there is no reason to be this teachy about this subject.
Which definitely, as you said, comes up in episode 2. And there are some sweet moments in episode 2. There are some like really beautiful dance scenes, and there's a
good
young
episode of television.
Yes, yeah, and there's this character named Damon who's like an up-and-comer, and he's a beautiful dancer, and you could see, it's just nice to watch that sort of coming-of-age story. So I enjoyed that part of it. So I kind of blocked out the didactic nature of it all.
Have you seen The Deuce?
I've seen about half of the first season. Yeah.
What do you think about this as a possible kind of sister show to The Deuce in terms of exploring New York at these time periods?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I think, The Deuce, despite how glossy it can feel at times, sort of has a seediness that I feel like Pose doesn't, from what the little that I've sort of been exposed to it so far. I mean, I got this like beautiful, decadent, FX does these wild marketing campaigns for their shows and press campaigns, and sends these...
Like FX and Discovery does that.
Yes, sends these elaborate press packages to various offices, and these incredibly, must be very expensive to produce, hardback books that arrive ahead of shows' premieres and sort of introduce the characters and the actors in these very kind of superfluous ways. And this book arrived in this like pink, like feather packaging. It was for a network that already does these elaborate press packages, it was the most elaborate that I'd seen yet. It was so glossy that I felt like when you're thinking about a show like The Deuce that explores some of those seedier aspects, it seemed like this was sort of almost acting as maybe almost a counterpart. Yeah,
I had that at my desk as well. Every time someone walked by, they would stop and look at it because it was so beautiful.
That's interesting. I was watching it the first couple episodes with someone, and one of the things that they were slightly let down by was how polished the show looked. They had hoped that it was going to be a bit more seedier feeling. I happen to like that element of the show. Let's move on to our next show here. Michelle Wolf's The Break. This past Sunday, Sarah Huckabee Sanders' biggest enemy made her Netflix debut. The show blended stand-up, sketch, and talk to create a slightly new, slightly similar to what we've seen before variety show. Let's look at a clip.
This show is called The Break with Michelle Wolf because it's literally a break. And also, my name's Michelle Wolf. There's a lot going on in the world right now.
Hey, you!
Oh my God!
I highly recommend the Stirrups feature.
I don't have time for emotion in my sex. Look, a TV came from the ceiling. Congratulations! The point is, we're all gonna die.
The Break with Michelle Wolf, every Sunday beginning May 27th, only on Netflix.
I tuned in for the majority of the show. I found it to be a little long, and I think I had something to do. No offense, Michelle Wolf, I'm a big fan. What did you guys think?
I actually really liked it. I was very impressed. I just got to know Michelle Wolf more recently. Of course, after the White House Correspondents' Dinner, she's in the news a lot more. I liked the way that she moved around throughout the show. She started off with a stand-up, then I think she went to the desk, kind of like a la Stephen Colbert, and then she had like a sit-down chat with someone and like interstitials in between. And I really enjoyed that. I thought it kind of kept the show moving.
Yeah, I'm a Michelle Wolf fan. I was actually introduced to her a few months ago when her HBO special came out, which I'll do a PSA.
Good.
It's incredible. I mean, I liked her at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I like her on this show, but that stand-up special is really, really dynamite hour of comedy. I think she came out really strong for this being a first episode of a show. I mean, obviously she is sort of occupying, as you just kind of hinted at, a relatively familiar format. She's not doing anything groundbreaking with this show. I will say her third segment, which was, and I will forget the woman's name. She has another woman on with her.
From the late Stephen.
The writer from
Yeah.
Seth Meyers.
Seth Meyers,
Seth Meyers,
yes,
writer, yes. And they do this kind of segment about
It's whether or not you're
Wait, do you know anything about it, Matt?
No, it's all about. I know because I actually liked this part, and they talked a little bit about like whether or not you're going to have a baby, and that
Yes,
women
about having
are
a
always
baby,
like,
yes.
oh, you have to have a child, you have to have a
Yes.
child, and not every woman has to have a
For
child.
the rest of this talk, you have to craft every one of your opinions with asking us what the details were
I was
of your
wait,
opinion.
As it's coming out of my mouth, what was that segment about that I want to complain about? Because it was
starred. What was that person's name?
Clearly, I remember it very vividly, which speaks well to the show. But my chief complaint with it was so scripted. Like the third segment, she comes out under the sort of guise of we're going to sit here and have this conversation about what it's like to be told that you need to have or to interpret people's reactions when you tell them that as a woman that you're not going to have a child. And I understand that this show has to be edited into a half-hour format and they can't just have this rambly conversation. But it was so clearly like just scripted to like the very T, where I just felt like it was just too forced. It felt like in this show that kind of opens with a written monologue and then moves into these video interstitials, like you're expecting some sort of almost like interview format at the end.
It's really a testament to why television or certain types of television works the way that it works, because it works. And I will also say the one thing that was different about it was that she didn't open with a monologue like most late night shows did. She opened with stand-up. And I thought that was the best part of the show. It was the most natural, it was the funniest, it made the best points, and it was the most watchable. Not that anything else wasn't watchable.
And it didn't require her to be incredibly topical or political about, it's not just a recap of what's going on in the news this week, which we have so many people on television and online doing right now.
She took it a step further. She talked about the NFL and the kneeling.
She did do some of it.
And she did some topical, but she definitely brought it to the next level. But maybe that's because that's what she's most comfortable doing. That's why she shines.
Exactly.
Maybe doing stand-up.
Well, it's the difference between it's a one-week show versus an every night show, right? Where an every night show is like you're literally just getting the jokes that you saw on Twitter all day because you're just responding to the news that has come up, where a one-week show can kind of create context around an entire conversation and make jokes about the NFL as a whole, not the specific thing that some Roger Goodall texted that day or said in a conference or something.
Kind of like the beauty of like John Oliver's show. Right. It's once a week and it's like you have to watch it.
Right.
It's a must-have.
Let's move on to our next subject. Up next, we have the fourth and final Sad Face by Me season of Unbreakable. Kimmy Schmidt. This is, without a doubt, my favorite show. It's relentlessly upbeat and relentlessly silly. It's Tina Fey and Robert Carlock. It's my happy place. Let's look at the trailer.
Zach wants me to fire one of the coders. I never want to make people feel sad. I'm not an Eeyore. I'm a poo. I'm a big old poo. What's with the frowny face? Are there no good men in this dang country?
You couldn't possibly understand what it is like to be a male today. Like, how come when your body makes milk, it's beautiful?
Squeeze me?
Kabir filed a sexual harassment complaint against you.
Why? I don't want you to feel embarrassed. Embarrassing stuff can happen to anyone. Uh-oh.
Would you look at that?
I love Kimmy Schmidt. I've watched 3 episodes, I think, so far, and it's my happy place. It makes me, I could just start going over the lines that I loved right now. I never have a negative thing to say about this show. Even when it's bad, and it never is, even when it's a lesser episode, I'm still so happy watching it.
You love it too, right, Matt?
I do like it. Yeah, I've always liked it. I'm okay with it sort of nearing the finish line
Me
at this
too.
point. I feel like the humor has become redundant, not necessarily the line-to-line comedy beats. We were sort of, reveling back in the green room about certain lines and things that we love. There's a great... There's a great Jenny McCarthy joke in the second episode that I'm obsessed with.
Joke about content that we.
Yes. And so I think like as strong as the writing can be, at some point it feels like the show is sort of almost like sort of stuck in a single frame mindset of just kind of like having it's sort of the same humor again and again and again. And at a certain point, I'm like,
what's wrong with that?
I 100% agree with Matt.
Maybe both of you should get the hell off my stage.
Bye, Ricky. Nice knowing you.
The rest of the show is me. I will tell you guys what to watch, and it's Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt on repeat.
It is such a great show, but I said this to you recently. I feel like I'm okay with it ending. I do love that the first episode they take on sexual harassment in a very surprising way, so I don't want to give it too much away, and I thought that was a really good take. The second one they do like white privilege, so they are talking on issues that in a good way that,
But I think what I've always loved about Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt is when they do talk about issues, they don't care about a message, and they just have great jokes about everything, and they come from a place of people who have gotten the message and are operating from a pretty sensitive place, but the show doesn't have to be that, and the show doesn't have to end with, and by the way, sexual harassment is bad, guys.
Yes. Right,
It's just great jokes about it.
Yeah, it's really natural. I know. I'm excited. I am excited to see the rest of the season, though. Yeah. So
you want it to end.
I mean, I'm okay with it ending. I would. It's not going to break my day. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I love 30 Rock and I love Kimmy Schmidt, and both of those shows are just kind of a receptacle for Tina Fey's sense of humor and Robert Carlock's sense of humor and the writers that they get around them. Both of them are just made up of the silliest lines and jokes possible. So get rid of Kimmy Schmidt and just get another one where you do the same thing, please.
Yes. And this season of Kimmy Schmidt resuscitates a 30 Rock joke, the TV show that they watch with Terry Polo, and please remind me of the details.
We have to answer it for you.
And Aisha Tyler.
That guy, he was in that movie. Do you know?
The funny thing is that Matt knows everything. He's like an encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to film and television.
Not detail.
Another
broad stroke.
What was the Greg Kinnear joke though in that episode that we were going over a little while ago? It was like he just got a deal with YouTube Brown. They gave him money for 10 episodes of literally anything.
Anything, yes.
My favorite joke about content, I think, so far.
I will say I really, really dislike the third episode of this season. I've seen 3, and we don't have the third episode is it's a faux documentary for a reason that is, I guess, a little spoilery, so I won't get into it. There's sort of a character who returns from that we've seen throughout the season, and they end up kind of doing this sort of American Vandal style. Very
Flash making of a murderer.
Yes. It's like
seems like a lot. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. It seems like a lot of shows on Netflix, going back to even The Break with Michelle Wolf and her Strong Woman sketch, are getting notes from Netflix to do episodes or sketches about Netflix.
About Netflix, yes. Yes, like the meta humor, yes.
I remember when Joel McHale's show premiered, he had a big sketch about like the Netflix family and working with them. I'm wondering if it's kind of like, we'll give you a show, we'll give you another season, but talk about us.
Right, so we can seem self-aware. Yeah, because Michelle Wolf has that joke where she cuts to where she's like, oh, it's a commercial now, but it's Netflix, so it's fake. And it's like, everything becomes like a little meta.
I mean, I guess Faye has kind of always done that. I mean, 30 Rock was very meta about NBC and Comcast the whole time, so maybe, I guess, Schmidt is just more organic and not like a note from Netflix executives. Should we move on to the next one?
Sure.
Okay, let's see. Oh, right. I'm reading it on the prompter. That's what I'm reacting to. I should just read it, but I'm just going to react to it on my own. Netflix's Arrested Development has premiered its 5th season. That was last week. There were controversies heard around the world that had almost nothing to do with the content of the show itself. So let's check out the show, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about the controversies.
What was it that brought everyone back together in town this time?
But this new beginning is different.
I don't like it.
Always
Because the Bluths are finally getting the award they think they deserve.
Family of the Month.
Yeah, are you motherfucking family of the motherfucking year?
Who'd give us that? We're giving it to ourselves. Right. Still doesn't seem like we'd get the votes.
Because nothing holds you down like family.
So I've seen 3 episodes of this, and I'm just gonna say right off the bat, before we even get into the New York Times thing that happened, I'm just gonna say the show is at its best in a moment where it doesn't seem like it knows how to do that much of anymore, which is just getting the characters together, slowing down, and letting them all be these characters, because that's really funny and they're really good at that, but it spends so much time being self-referential and calling back to itself, and that is unfortunately really boring and not as funny as I think they think it is and as much as they think their fans think it is, because as a fan, I don't think it's very funny.
I could not agree more. The Byzantine nature of this plot at this point in this show has grown so obnoxious to me. I think I can appreciate that our single cam comedies are meant to be more quote unquote sophisticated than our multi-cams, but at this point, just the amount of explaining that this show has to do to catch you up with the plot at any given moment.
And then clearly likes doing,
and
so
like
it keeps doing it.
Thinks
does that all the time.
that it's the appeal of the show. I get it's like, I'm not saying that it's like a bug of the show. It's the the show thinks it is a feature of the show when it is actually a bug of the show.
Yeah, it's become that, I think. Yeah. I do. I watched Arrested Development from the get-go from 2003. I remember working somewhere and I saw a preview of it. I'm like, this is amazing. So I really, right off the bat, I love the show. First 3 seasons. It was nice to see the 4th season back on Netflix. This season, I'm getting maybe similar to the Kimmy Schmidt thing. I'm a little tired, and to be honest, with the controversies, it was a little hard watching it, knowing behind the scenes what's going on with Jeffrey Tambor and the allegations and everything. So I think.
Did you guys have any problem watching it before the New York Times piece came out, or was it after the New York Times piece came out? Because that made it a little bit harder, to be honest.
Because listening to the audio of the interview was very hard to listen to the other castmates sort of defend or not defend Jessica Walter rather. So it was a little uncomfortable. It was hard not to think about it. Let's put it that way. That said, I love Jason Bateman. I think he's great. I think all of the cast members are amazing. I mean,
that's what I
Tony
mean. They're
Hale,
all so good.
I mean, every one person's better than the next.
Yes, when you put the Bluth family in a room and they're doing jokes that are based on the writing of that scene and not the grander outline of what everything is referring back to or building toward, the show is very enjoyable and what it more or less always has been, aside from the wonky 4th season, which I just thought was exhausting. And
well, I'll go back and I'll say the best part of Arrested Development has been the first 2 seasons when they were building storylines rather than referring back to storylines they already built, because by the time the 3rd season came, they were doing a lot of what they started doing in the 4th and 5th, and all 3 of those seasons for me, 3, 4, and 5, have been a little tiresome because they're constantly just referring back to itself, whereas the first 2, it all felt a little new at least, and we were building new stories and characters. Have you gotten to the episode in the new season where they're all kind of in that room like we saw in that trailer? There's like an extended scene where they're all in the room together.
Yeah, I don't think so.
It's the best moment of the whole season.
I don't think I got there either. But this season, it's kind of funny because Jason Bateman and Michael Cera, their characters are dating the same girl, which is just awkward. So that's an awkward moment. And Portia de Rossi's character is like running for office. And there's a lot of Trump references as well. Right. Yeah. So, and of course, like the wall situation.
The wall is fun. I mean, I think that's a funny through line.
Yeah.
Right, Jessica Walters, that's a great twist that Mexico's going to pay for it.
Yeah. So that's a great line. So that's when the show is at its best. Same for Kimmy Schmidt.
There's brilliant comedy writers behind the show and brilliant performers. The problem is that like fans have told them via Reddit forums for too long that the show is at its best when it's talking about itself rather than being itself. And
I feel like you're in on something, and I guess some people like that. I don't know.
Aren't you already in on something when you get a joke, though? Yeah. Like, isn't the definition of a joke feeling like you're in on something?
Yes.
Let's move on to our next one. This is in the cinema. A new film. It's called A Kid Like Jake. It's the story of a Brooklyn couple forced to rethink their ideas about gender and parenting when they're told their 4-year-olds gender nonconformity may not be a phase. Let's check out the trailer.
Even if we could afford it, is a private school even what I want for Jake? I know we've always said we're not those parents, but
Can't afford to be.
Maybe the numbers are ridiculous.
But you have to remember, everybody wants diversity. Why not talk a little about his gender-expansive play? You want him to be somewhere he can thrive, right?
You really don't think it's weird?
I mean, he does like to play dress up. That's not news.
Yeah, he likes fairy tales, but maybe that's not the most critical thing worth mentioning.
He asked why boys can't wear skirts.
I don't want to send him off to kindergarten labeled. He's only 4. What if he starts thinking there's something wrong with him?
Take it away, Matt. I haven't seen it.
Neither of us have seen it. So it's all Matt.
I've seen A Kid Like Jake. I saw it. I think it was the last movie that I saw at Sundance back in January. So after 7 days of seeing movies, I think it put the nail on the festival for me. So at that point, you're very exhausted by the time you sit down for this 9 p.m. premiere after seeing 20 movies in 7 days. That said, I do remember it relatively well. Don't ask me for the details, but I can give you the broad strokes of it. A Kid Like Jake is sort of an interesting phenomenon in that, we often see, this is based on a play that was on Broadway. We often see, plays adapted into films in very kind of cursory ways. In other words, basically the play is put into a room and filmed with an expensive camera, and that's about all that's done to it. And A Kid Like Jake is very much, that is very much the case. It feels, the dialogue, the staging, everything feels, the scope is a little bit broader. We visit, this is about, as you saw in the trailer, a kind of gender probing child kind of questioning their identity, and the parents kind of responding to that. So of course that puts them, walking down New York City streets and in.
I was gonna say, is the scope broadened by being like, let's take part of this scene and move it
and put it outside? Yes, they like go to the school where the child attends. So I mean, I haven't seen the play, so I don't know. I think the play actually was very narrow in scope, is my understanding. All that said, I think this movie is fine. I think there's something really missing from it, which is the child in question. This movie is, you caught a couple glimpses of the child in the promo that was just played, but we really don't spend hardly any time actually seeing or getting a feel for what this child is actually experiencing. It's all the characters talking about the child, and watching it, I feel like there is a layer missing from it. I understand this is a very demanding role for a child actor to have to pull off, and maybe that has something to do with why it was sort of staged the way that it was, but there's sort of a core emotional beat to this movie that is absent, and it makes the movie feel a little empty. That said, Claire Danes is very good in it. She and Jim Parsons play a married couple, and they're kind of going through this crisis, sort of independent of and both tied to the child's sort of own kind of reckoning, and they play a lot of emotional beats very well.
Forgive me because I haven't seen the movie, but isn't that kind of a common criticism of films about the LGBTQ community, is that they're so often from the lens of a straight person's eyes, or so often the sort of arc of the LGBTQ person is we're only seeing the effect of it on the sort of heteronormative people in the film?
Yeah, I think so. I wish I could think off the top of my head of some good core examples of that. I mean, I think we see that in a lot of sort of quote-unquote issues-based movie. I mean, I think that's, obviously the films about people of color, we talk a lot about kind of the white savior trope. And I think that does very much apply to LGBTQ media. I wish I could think of a great example off the top of my head, but this is very much that case where all you see is sort of a little glimpse of the kid kind of putting on a skirt, and like that's about as emotionally rich into the psychology of what it would like to be the child, who is inherently the most.
They're just consistently talking about this child that's never really there.
Not in terms of an actual three-dimensional movie character.
That's a choice.
It's a choice.
That's a choice.
So it's like kind of more about what the parents have to go through or have to undertake with something like this.
Yes, and I think, there's some legitimacy to showing what it's like to have a, genderqueer relative, and what is that like for a parent to go through to rationalize. And I think that's a valid experience to depict, but I think this movie fails to recognize that the most interesting person in it is not either of the parents. parents. So you can show that vantage point without having to reduce the actual central narrative of the movie, which is about this very interesting kid going through this very interesting modern thing.
Let's move on to our next movie. Johnny Knoxville is back with more stunts and apparently worse injuries in his new movie, Action Point. I could summarize it for you, but does anyone really care what it's about? Let's just watch him fall down in funny ways.
What this place needs is an excitement enema. We're gonna make this place fast and loose. Every ride, every attraction, no rules, no speed limits, just pure fun.
That sounds kind of dangerous.
Let's see what this baby can do.
The new Action Point is now open. Free beer for everybody.
Okay, I love Johnny Knoxville. I love Jackass. I said that Kimmy Schmidt is my happy place, but the reality is whenever I'm feeling really down, I watch Jackass movies, and it lifts me up. I love them. I'm probably gonna see this.
I definitely want to see this. I like Jackass. I really like Johnny Knoxville. The funny thing about this film is that it was inspired by an amusement park that was based in Vernon, New Jersey called Action Park. Not Action Point, but Action Park. And I actually went there as a kid. It closed in 1996, I believe, and it was probably not to this extreme, but nobody left there without an injury. I mean, it is 100% this sort of vibe. Anything goes. I think they reopened it, but it's a lot safer now. But that was the thing, they didn't want that. So apparently there was like a 14-minute documentary that someone sent to Johnny Knoxville, and they said, let's make a movie out of this. And then this is the results, so I want to see it because it's a part of my childhood.
You are shaking your head. Not nodding in agreement, but shaking your head in, I think, disapproval, maybe disgust and disappointment.
I recognize your right to enjoy anything that you possibly could want to. This is my nightmare. This whole franchise is my nightmare. I
Really?
Yeah.
You've never gotten a good laugh out of a Jackass.
No Bad Grandpa? No, not on your roster of best films.
Steve-O snorting wasabi did not get you.
He's done all the thing is, these are real stunts. I mean, I've seen interviews with him. There's no cutaways.
Have you read about all the brain injuries?
Yeah,
I don't, like, whatever. I'm not being preachy about it.
Oh, yeah,
I don't care about that. But they have sustained a lot of brain injuries.
no,
There have been a lot of, these people are,
That's what's so much fun
They're
about
in
watching
this.
them. They're certifiable.
Yeah, Chris Pontius is in it as well, the former Jackass member, so.
And we should say also that the movie is most likely not very good because the studio has not screened it for anybody, and it opens
Did not
today.
screen for press, which is always an indicator of the quality of a movie.
Yeah.
Which, I mean,
but
the
I
people
don't
going
care.
into exactly. I mean, the people who are interested in this are going to get what they paid for and love it, and that's fine.
Johnny
They know what
Knoxville
they have
fall
on their
down. I
hands.
laugh. That's the ticket for me. I don't care if press likes it or not.
And he said he's been injured on this film more than any other film he's ever done. So.
Well, he's old as fuck. Of course he's getting injured more.
Yes, and he said that if there are any more Jackass movies, he's going to have to transfer it to the young kids. He can't do it anymore.
What was the big injury that was going around in the press that he got some sort of fractal concussion behind his eye that he didn't realize he had until after he went home from the hospital, he blew his nose and his eyeball popped out.
Yes.
And he had to put it back in.
No, give him your money. Support this.
Goddamn right I will.
This weekend.
Yeah, he
today.
really believes in his cause. What are you fighting him for, Matt? Come on.
This is exclusive about my sensibilities. I just don't find injury humor to be a selling point for a comedy. But that's great. I'm glad that a handful of people, hopefully with diminishing returns, find this franchise still viable.
Ouch.
This isn't part of that franchise. This is hopefully a brand new franchise with more injuries that we can enjoy.
Gosh.
Let's move on to the next one. He's getting uncomfortable. This weekend, we find Shailene Woodley doing some stunts of her own in the Lost at Sea drama Adrift from a director whose name I won't dare try to pronounce.
Get below! I'm not leaving you! Get below now! Oh my God! Oh my God! Go!
I will say this. As much as you feel, or what you feel about the Jackass franchise, I feel about Lost at Sea movies. Because I always go into them going, well, what'd you go to sea for in the first place?
On The
dummy?
Shallows?
Yeah, I know. Well, Shallows is different. That's like an exploitation B movie with a shark. That's just silly fun. But like people Lost at Sea, whether they're gonna live or die, I'm always kind of like, I don't care. Yeah.
Well, having seen this film, I'll say that I was actually pleasantly surprised. I liked it more than I expected. I'm not a Lost at Sea kind of gal. I'm not a Lost at Sea kind of gal, but I was like, okay, I'll see it. That said, this is based on a real story. So there were two people who went out to sea in the early 80s, and it's hard to talk about this film without giving too much away.
Take place in the early 80s in the movie?
It does take place in the
They
early
listen
80s.
to 80s music?
There's no 80s music. It does.
I don't want it.
I know,
What?
right?
What?
I know. It's not like Pose where 80s are everywhere.
I wanted roller disco on the Lost at Sea ship.
They are in Thailand, and they have a boat that they have to take a job for, and they go to San Diego, and it's a couple, and it's very much about young love, and that's beautiful to see. I'd have to say, like, it stars Shailene Woodley and Sam Claflin, and I don't know about their chemistry on set. I just like, I wasn't 100% buying it, but it's still a beautiful story. It plays with time, back and forth. I actually like the play with time, but other critics might not. And it's hard to, I would say, if you're going to see this film, you are going to drop $15 on it or whatever it's going to cost. Do not read anything about the film beforehand or about the real story, because it was based on a book. And if I knew anything about it before, I wouldn't have liked it half as much as I did.
Because there's a big twist.
Well, that's the thing. There's a big twist. Right. There's a huge twist, and
What's
I feel like
twist? Tell everybody the twist.
But it wasn't.
Thanks for coming, guys. We're going to ruin movies for you now.
Yeah, there is a twist, and admittedly, so I didn't see it coming. And looking back, it's almost a cheap twist. I'm just going to put it out there. It's almost a cheap twist. But Shailene Woodley is really good in it. She saw the script, she fell in love with it immediately, and she does a really great job. She's a great actress, and Sam was really cute. I was like, don't mind looking at him for an hour and a half. Sure. And so she is great, and she actually learned to sail and spent a lot of time sailing for this, and the production quality is very good. You actually feel like they're at sea. So
the director, Balthazar Komokor, right?
Oh, wow, that's impressive. Wow.
You got it. He is kind of a natural disaster movie. He did Everest before this, and then I'm not exactly sure what he did. Probably some volcano movie. I don't know. I'm just assuming. I don't think so.
He just takes survival movies or survival stories and sets them in different natural locations.
Everest.
He knows his strengths, and it shows in this film. And I think they filmed it in Fiji.
He's a very good director. He's very good at this type of stuff, right?
Yeah, and I think it shows in this film. They filmed it in Fiji, and it's beautiful, and it's terrifying. I don't want to go on a boat for a very long time.
Well, last but not least, at least in my list, is horror maestro Lee Whannell's new sci-fi action thriller Upgrade, which follows a paraplegic that's given extraordinary powers via a computer chip dropped into his spine. It's sort of like how I tell all my friends I feel after not drinking for one night. Let's take a look.
Can I have everybody's attention?
I'm looking for the guys who murdered my wife.
Are you one of them?
Yeah. Stanley can take over.
Thank you. I now have full control.
Hi.
You upgraded. Now you're stronger. Faster.
So I'm just going to bring up the 14-year-old me for a second who saw this movie and say this movie rules, guys. It is graphically violent in very fun Paul Verhoeven, RoboCop kind of ways, all practical effects.
That's a good hook.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's a very enjoyable B sci-fi movie, and he did a great job directing it. There's some corniness to it, and there's some stuff that you're gonna, I guess, roll your eyes at, but it's very much living in the world of RoboCop, the first Terminator, and relishing it and having a good time with it.
Still feel fresh and new, even though it sort of harkens back to those?
It feels like it harkens back to those, but it takes place in a dystopic world that feels sort of contemporary criticism about us right now. And I think one of the kind of villain is named Aaron and is like Elon, and he's a tech guy. If you get it. So it's that kind of movie, right? It's not very deep, but it's a lot of fun, and it's made very well. It's polished, and Logan Marshall Green, who I really enjoyed in The Invitation, the Karen Kusama film from a few years ago, which if you haven't seen,
fantastic.
It's on Netflix. It's a really great thriller. He's in it, and he's very, very good and very funny. And the movie doesn't take itself too seriously. It's very much in the vein of Paul Verhoeven, I think, in the RoboCop Total Recall era, which again, 14-year-old me goes nuts for. Yeah.
Awesome.
Any other questions about it, guys? Because I just keep talking about it. I can just
Betty
keep going.
Gabriel's in it, right? From Get Out. The no woman from Get Out.
I don't think so. Oh, she is in it. Yes, she plays a police officer or a detective. She's the detective in the film. And also, I will say one of the things that's really cool about the movie and a testament to the director is that the budget was really small. It was like essentially the same budget as like Get Out. Which is about $5 million. And they do a really phenomenal job of creating this world and using very distinct locations to set up a futuristic society. When he told me the budget, I was kind of shocked after I had seen it because it does not look like a $5 million by any stretch of the imagination. And again, the gore is awesome. And it's all practical.
Well, it is from the Saw filmmaker, so.
It's true, it is from the Saw filmmaker. There's this one scene, guys, where like a knife, but no, I'm not gonna do that.
Matt, are you gonna run to see it?
I think you would enjoy it.
I would see it. I will see it. I don't mind gore. I can do gore more than I'll do people falling off of, I don't know, roller coasters or whatever they're gonna do in this.
Let's go do a double feature together, Matt.
Okay.
Of Action Point and Upgrade.
Oh gosh, that sounds very satisfying for you.
Yeah, I was gonna say all fun for me, and even more fun because I get to watch you just kind of get uncomfortable and unhappy while watching. Yeah. That's really all that we have for movies and TV shows. Before we go, Lauren, I hear you have some Streamline recommendations for us. What is that?
Yeah, so Streamline is HuffPost series, and it basically whittles down the best films and television shows you should watch every week. And it's Hulu, it's Amazon Prime, and it's Netflix. So, of course, Netflix, we have Arrested Development. That's one of our top recommendations this week. And also Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt and Pose on the FX channel. And in addition, there's this TV show called, and I haven't watched it yet, but it's on the top of the list. Our senior reporter Todd Van Luling puts it together, and it's called Succession. It's on HBO. Have you heard about it?
Succession, yes.
Yeah. So I haven't seen it. Is it any good?
Forgot to talk about that one.
Yeah,
I've seen 7 episodes of it actually.
It's top on our list this week.
It starts a little rough because it's about a group very much like it's very loosely influenced by the Murdochs and a kind of media conglomerate run by a cantankerous old white guy and his kids vying for power. And they are really disgusting rich people. They're very cold, they're very calculating, and extremely cynical. And about halfway through the first episode, I was kind of thinking to myself, do I really want to spend time with a bunch of like mean rich white people? That sounds awful right now, considering how we're living. Yeah. And I feel like on Twitter, I'm spending time with mean, rich white people all the time who are just ruining my life. But I will say these sort of dynasty-esque plot twists end up kind of gripping you and pulling you in. Plus, all of the actors are phenomenal. And the writer and creator is a guy who was a main writer on Peep Show as well as on In the Thick of It. So there's really great, juicy one-liners in the show that you can kind of grab onto that end up elevating it past just being about a group of awful rich people.
And I think Adam McKay is behind it too as a producer.
Yeah, I think he directed the pilot.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's the other one to check out.
Yeah. Matt, what are you going to be watching this weekend? What are you actually going to be watching? We talked about everything, but what are you actually going to be watching?
I have a screener of this documentary, 3 Identical Strangers, that everybody has been buzzing about. It's like this twisty.
Oh yes, all right.
Yeah. These like fraternal twin or triplet brothers who got reunited, and apparently something wild happens. But I think this is a weird week for movies. We're sort of in this in-between period after having just had the behemoths of Avengers, Deadpool, and Star Wars, bam, 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 and then now we kind of have a slow week. But next week,
Action Point is out though. What do you mean slow week?
Yeah. Have you guys seen A Quiet Place? But next week I'm really, really excited. Next week's slate is like Ocean's 8, Hereditary, which is wonderful, and Won't You Be My Neighbor, the Mr. Rogers doc. All three like very worthwhile movies. So I feel like we're in this kind of weird in-between week heading into like a really, really exciting like full throttle movie week next week, which is exciting. After these, big, huge tentpoles, now we get some kind of in-betweens, and it's nice to see that coming next week.
Well, guys, thanks so much for talking to me about movies and TV. And that does it for us at Build Weekend Watch. Just to recap, Pose premieres on FX this Sunday at 9. Kimmy Schmidt, Arrested Development, and The Break with Michelle Wolf are currently on Netflix. And A Kid Like Jake, Adrift, and Upgrade are in theaters today. Thanks so much for being here. That's in my prompter, so I gotta say it again. I'm Ricky Camilleri, signing off by saying, why on earth would you spend the weekend outside when I've just informed you of all the amazing stuff you could be watching indoors? Stay inside and get pale.
Woo!